Anyone who's even slightly involved in the free software world has either heard this line or some modified version of this line from the GNU website. Free software is a matter of liberty, not price. To understand the concept, you should think of free as in free speech, not as in free beer. We sometimes call it Libre software, borrowing the French or Spanish word for free as in freedom, to show we do not mean the software is gratis. With that in mind, for reasons completely unrelated to free software, we shouldn't disregard the gratis aspect either, and not just in the free software world, but in the open source world as well, or the wider world of free and open source software, otherwise just FOSS. Now, for the sake of clarity, if I'm talking about the free software movement, from now on, I will say Libre software movement, just to make things a bit easier to understand. Assuming there are no suitable free alternatives, I would be fine paying $5, $10, $20 for the right to use some of the software on my system, like OBS, like a terminal, like a web browser, and a lot of the other software that I make use of every single day. For me, paying a couple of dollars here and there isn't that big of a deal. Like, I can afford to do so. And many of the people watching this channel probably have a couple of dollars to throw around here and there as well. But that doesn't mean you want to throw the money around. You probably would prefer to get something free if the option is available. And for a lot of people out there, you probably don't have, $5. Like, for you, $5 might actually be a lot of money. $5 might be prohibitively expensive for all but the absolute necessities. Maybe not so much in, much of Europe, much of the United States, in Australia. And for those people, the idea of having a fully gratis system, that is incredibly compelling outside of just the Libre software aspect. But maybe you do live somewhere like the United States, like Europe, like Australia, where your currency has a lot more buying power, but maybe you're really young and just don't have the ability to have some sort of income, or maybe the bills are just really, really tight. You're, living paycheck to paycheck, and you just cannot afford to spend a couple of dollars for the software you rely on a day-to-day basis. Once again, for people like this, the idea of good, gratis software is incredibly valuable. Now, it's not like the FOSS world is the only place where not paying for software is completely normal. And I don't mean with software piracy, I mean with things like freeware and shareware. Now, it's a little bit hard to pin down exactly when the concepts were first created. We do know the term was coined by Andrew Flugelman with his program called PC Talk. This was done in 1982. But other people may have been using a similar model before that and just not using that terminology. Andrew had a simple model. His software PC Talk was not being distributed in software stores. Instead, if you mailed him a formatted floppy disk, he would send you back a copy of his program. Now, this program was entirely free to use, but it would also encourage users to send Andrew $25 if they liked the program, but they didn't have to, it was entirely optional. Andrew also encouraged people to make copies of the software and share it around with their friends. He even included a batch file to automatically do so. This model was basically an experimental marketing strategy. He didn't know it was going to be successful, but in the end, it was incredibly successful for him, basically spawning the idea of freeware and shareware. Side note, a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. Technically, they do mean different things. Usually, shareware is free software that is a trial. There is some sort of limit applied to using it, and to unlock that limit, you have to pay some money. Maybe you have a game, and you can play the first level. If you pay some money, then you get the full game. Whereas freeware is just a free experience where you're encouraged to pay money if you feel like the software is good. But since there is no governing body defining what is and is not freeware and shareware, a lot of people use the terms interchangeably and they've been sort of mixed up over the years. Also, it's often the case for freeware and shareware that it's for a specific version. It's for version 1.0, version 1.1, version 1.2, and there's no expectation of receiving future updates. But in the FOSS world, this is generally not the case. Unless we're talking about outlier projects like Bitwarden, like GitLab, which do lock features behind a paywall, which isn't a model I completely disagree with. For most projects out there, they are just flat out free. All of the source code is just there. Nobody is saying you have to pay money. A lot of projects aren't even giving you a convenient way to give them money. It's like, okay, you can give us money. It's going to be on like some GitHub somewhere. It's going to be on our website. But like in the actual application, there is no indication of who to give money to if you actually want to support that project. Obviously, it's not the case for a random project with one developer on GitHub, but when we're talking about a well-known, well-supported project like GIMP, like Critter, like Ubuntu, these are projects where it's pretty much expected that, at least for the foreseeable future, they are going to be continually updated just entirely for free. Whilst the idea of FOSS isn't philosophically about making things free of charge, making things gratis, the vast majority of projects are developed under this model. Some developers out there do work for a company, like they work for Red Hat, they work for Canonical, they work for Elementary, they work for Endless OS, and some developers even make enough money purely off donations to do this full time. But the vast majority of developers are doing this entirely as volunteer work, basically out of the goodness of their heart. A lot of these developers are making incredible software that, in any other context, they would be perfectly reasonable charging money for. And due to this power, due to this opportunity provided by the FOSS world, you can build not only a completely functional computing system, you can build an incredibly powerful one, whether we're talking about on Linux, on BSD, with all of the software that you would expect to have from any experience where you're paying for a bunch of software on Windows. You can have your image editing suite, you can have a video editor, you can have all of this other stuff completely for free. Now, obviously, it is best if you can go and financially support these developers. They do have bills to pay, they do have mouths to feed, ain't nothing in this world for free. But if you don't have that ability, or for whatever reason you just don't want to pay for the software, it's all there available to use, and this is incredibly important. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions where you cannot find a suitable replacement in the FOSS world, notably with video games, because yes, there are things like Mindtest and all of these other great projects, but if you're looking to play a game, you're generally looking to play the specific game. You're not looking for a game that is mostly similar like Mindtest with a bunch of mods. I don't have any statistics, metrics, or graphs on this, but if I was to guess, I would assume that most people in the Linux world probably haven't paid for any of the software they're using. That includes donations to various projects. And if you have, there is probably a very small handful of projects you've actually given money to. It's not like you've donated to the entire software stack you're using. And another great thing about FOSS is if you're so inclined, if you have the knowledge to do so, you could always just go and improve the software yourself. Maybe the developer has stepped away from the project, or maybe the developer on the project is looking for some additional help, and maybe there's a bunch of issues listed that they just cannot work through themselves. If you know what you're doing, you can then go and help out that project and improve the lives of a bunch of people trying to use it. If needed, you can take over a project and now be the future release that was otherwise never going to happen. This is simply not possible without having access to the source code. Whilst free as in beer may not be the intended goal of free software, may not be the intended goal of FOSS, it cannot be disregarded that this has been a major selling point for its adoption, and along with this, its continued interest going into the future. There are a lot of projects out there that try to bring in the idea of paying some amount of money, or even just having the ability to pay some amount of money from the start, like Elementary OS, for example, where you have the option of paying money to download Elementary OS, or you can just change it to a custom amount of 0 and just download it completely for free. It's not that rare that I see at least a couple of people here and there complaining about this model, saying, well, it's free software, so shouldn't the software be free? And I think a part of that mentality just comes from the confusing nature of calling it free software. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The Free Software Foundation should have never been called the Free Software Foundation. We should have never called it free software. Free software is a needlessly confusing term. Libre software should have been the only term ever used from the beginning. In English, Libre just didn't have a meaning. So if you bring that term into English, people are just going to accept whatever meaning you give it. And then the languages it does come from, like French and Spanish, It already has that freedom meaning that is intended by the free software movement and doesn't have that additional confusion with things like gratis. And I'd be very curious to see an alternate history where we never use the term free software and instead use Libre software from the start. There probably wouldn't be anywhere near as much apprehension about giving projects money to support the developers who are putting in hours upon hours of work on software that so many people benefit from. But I don't know. This was a very rambly video, and if you made it to the end, good on you. I don't know how you did so. But if you did, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of gratis software? Do you see the value this has for certain people out there? Do you see the value it has for yourself? Do you wish there was less apprehension by some users to pay developers a little bit of money here and there to support the development of software they use on a day-to-day basis? Let me know in the comment section down below. So if you liked the video, for some reason, like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, to go Patreon, subscribe to the Libre pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and this video is free, but I do accept donations.
Something like this.